Before diving into this incredible story, consider subscribing to the channel and hitting the bell. Every story here has something to say, and you won't want to miss a single one. She left him with 5 children. 10 years later, what became of him leaves her speechless. Austin Miller lived in Greenville, a sleepy little town nestled among the Tennessee hills, where gravel roads meet cornfields, and where everyone knows the mailman's first name. He was 34 years old, his back a little hunched from years of manual labor, his hands marked by the burns and calluses of a man who lived by fire and iron. He worked as a welder in a local shop, a large sheet metal structure near the railroad tracks, where he spent his days assembling pieces of metal, repairing rusty frames, listening to the radio crackling between 2 sparks. Every evening at 6 p.m. sharp, he would walk through the door of their modest wooden house, set on the edge of a dirt road. A house without luxuries, but full of life. As soon as he pushed open the door, he was greeted by Elijah's laughter, the baby reaching out from his high chair, and the reassuring smell of toast, hot soup, and fresh laundry detergent that smelled of the sheets spread out in the laundry room. Maya and Hope drew at the kitchen table. Jordan helped Caleb with his homework, and Emily sometimes hummed while cooking dinner, an old scarf tied in her light brown hair. Emily. He had met her at the local church 10 years earlier. She was full of life, full of dreams too. She wanted to write, travel, see big cities. But love and children had come quickly, and her dreams had lapsed somewhere between 2 loads of laundry and a box of diapers. She said that was enough for her. She smiled often. And Austin, discreet, solid as an old oak, believed in the simple peace they had built together. But he hadn't seen it coming. The silences are getting longer and longer. Emily's lost gazes on the terrace, the sighs she let trail like dead leaves. He thought it was fatigue, that it would pass. Until that August evening. It was muggy, the air clinging to the walls, and the kids were already in their pajamas. Austin had just gotten home, his arms still black with soot, when he found her standing in the living room. Her suitcase was there, propped against the couch. Emily wasn't looking at him. His voice was shaking. "I can't take it anymore, Austin. I'm suffocating. I've lost who I was. I want to live, not just survive." Austin didn't understand at first. He approached slowly, thinking it was a bad joke. But Emily moved away. There was no anger in her voice. Just a deep, damaged sadness, like a torn fabric that can no longer be sewn back together. "You love me, I know. But I don't recognize myself here anymore. I don't want to end my life wondering who I could have been." He looked at the children. Jordan, 12, had frozen, holding Elijah in his arms. Maya had tears in her eyes, unsure why. Caleb had hidden under the table. Austin didn't shout. He didn't beg her. That wasn't like him. He simply nodded, almost imperceptibly. Emily left without another word, and the door closed gently. No snap, no scene, just a thick silence, unreal. Austin stood there for a few seconds, frozen, staring into space. Then, without a word, he threw his jacket on the chair, walked into the kitchen, put the water on to boil, and took out the plates. He cut the bread and served the soup, as he did every night. He kissed Elijah's forehead. He told Jordan to finish his homework. But that night he didn't sleep. He sat in the kitchen, a cold cup of coffee in his hands, staring into space. Outside, the crickets chirped, the moon shone indifferently. Inside, a man had just had his heart broken, without fanfare, without noise. Only with words and a suitcase. And without a cry, he understood that his life had just changed. The following weeks were a nightmare. Austin's days had become an endless chain of responsibilities, fatigue, and heavy silences. From 5 a.m. to midnight, he lived to survive, mechanically, like a soldier in a silent war. He got up before dawn to prepare breakfasts, dress the children, wipe away tears and arguments, tie shoelaces, check school bags. Then he rushed to the workshop, his eyes dark, his limbs aching, his heart elsewhere. At the factory, the flames of the blowtorch burned no brighter than the loneliness in his torso. His colleagues sometimes gave him a sympathetic look, but no one really found the words. His boss, Mr. Jenkins, a man with a white mustache and a deep voice, had once summoned him into his office to say, "If you need to take a few days," but Austin had simply nodded. "No. If I stop, everything collapses." He had lost 12 kilos in 2 months. His jeans hung loose around his waist. His eyes had sunken, and his shoulders, once broad and strong, seemed to be closing in on themselves. He spoke only to give instructions or calm a fit of tears. At home, the children asked questions he himself didn't dare face. Why did Mom leave? Will she come back? Is it because we weren't nice? Austin always answered the same thing. No, it's not your fault. Never. He categorically refused any social assistance that a county aide had called, suggesting food assistance or counseling, but he had answered in a dry voice. My children won't grow up with the shame of having been abandoned. They'll know that we held on. Pride, even if bruised, remained his last bastion. To make room, he installed an old camp bed in the garage, where he stored his tools and boxes of clothes that were too small. This was where he slept now, among cans of oil and souvenirs that he didn't have time to sort through. He left the bedrooms to the children, making sure every night that the sheets were clean, the nightlights were on, and that nightmares wouldn't take over. On weekends, he tinkered with lawnmowers, repaired worn-out engines, and sold old items online. At night, when the children were asleep, he delivered newspapers or food for a few dollars more. He drank lukewarm coffee and ate what was left on his children's plates. Sometimes nothing. He no longer looked at his reflection in the mirror. He forgot himself. He was a machine, a fortress that trembled but stood firm. And yet, sometimes, at night, alone in the garage, he sat on the cold floor, his back against the wall, his eyes staring into space. And he thought about leaving, about giving up everything. He wondered if Emily still thought about him. He wondered if he was failing, despite all his efforts. He thought about his own childhood, about his silent, harsh father, and he prayed that he wouldn't become like him. Then one evening, as he hit rock bottom, 8-year-old Maya quietly walked into the garage. She was holding a crumpled piece of paper in her hands. Dad, I made this for you. She handed him the drawing. A man built like a rock, wearing a cap, holding a large hammer. And around him, 5 small, laughing faces. Below, in clumsy letters, Dad is our superhero. Austin looked down, his hands shaking. He couldn't stop the sobs that he collapsed at Eno screaming. No anger, just hot, old tears finally falling. Maya sat against him, silent, her head against his arm. And in this moment of extreme fragility, something was rebuilt. He felt his daughter's warmth, the raw truth of that drawing, and understood that, despite everything, he was not alone. That he was seen, loved, that he mattered. And he stood up. Not just physically, he stood up inwardly, he regained control, slowly and determinedly. This was no longer just a matter of survival. It was a promise, a rebirth. Austin had always had a special relationship with metal. It wasn't just a material to be welded, bent, or repaired. It was for him a living matter, full of potential and transformation. Since he was a child, he loved to touch the cold steel, to feel the resistance of the iron bars, to listen to the melody of the sparks that flew under the blowtorch. But what he loved above all was the power to transform this raw metal into something beautiful, poetic, almost alive. So, every night, after checking that the children were fast asleep in their rooms, Austin would settle into his small workshop at the back of the garage. There, under a dim light, he would gather the scraps of metal he had salvaged, old rusty chains, twisted plates, abandoned pipes. He would look at them, think about them, and slowly assemble them. Little by little, his creations would take shape. Steel birds, with wings spread as if to take flight, with laser-cut feathers, fine and fragile. Twisted trees, whose branches seemed to dance in the breath of the invisible wind. Abstract silhouettes, faces frozen in cold metal, imbued with pain and hope. These sculptures were his way of breathing, of speaking when words failed him, of shouting when silence weighed too heavily. They told his story, his doubts, his rage, his rebirth. One evening, while he was putting the finishing touches on a large piece depicting an eagle with outstretched wings, Jordan, his eldest son, entered the garage. Now a teenager, he was beginning to take an interest in photography. Fascinated by his father's work, he took out his phone and took several shots, playing with light and shadow. "Dad, look at this," he said, pointing at the screen. Austin smiled, tired but proud. Without much thought, Jordan posted a photo of the steel bird on Instagram with a simple message. "My father creates beauty from what life throws away." A few hours later, they were surprised by the notifications. Likes poured in. So did comments. Strangers from Tennessee, then from other states, praised Austin's work. In less than a week, the post had gone viral. A curious art gallery in Nashville contacted him. They wanted to exhibit his work. Then a local journalist wrote an article titled "The Greenville Artist, the Welder Who Sculpts Hope." Soon, clients from New York and Chicago were calling to order his sculptures. In 3 years, Austin Miller's life had changed completely. From the shadow of his small studio in a modest home, he became a renowned artist, admired for his ability to transform pain into beauty. He exhibited in prestigious galleries in Chicago, Dallas, and even Berlin, where his work reached an international audience. But what made him most proud was what he had created here in Greenville. With the help of his first earnings, he launched a foundation dedicated to offering welding and artistic creation workshops to young people who had dropped out of school, to those who, like him, needed an outlet, hope, a helping hand. His studio became a sanctuary, a place of fire, metal, and dreams, where each piece told a story of resilience. But despite his success and travel, Austin never left Greenville. "My roots are here," he often repeated to those who questioned him. "This is where I was broken, and where I rebuilt myself. It's not just a place on a map. It's the crucible of my story." Every sculpture, every workshop, every smile of a young person he helped was a silent tribute to Emily, to the children, to the pain and the strength that had carried them. One autumn morning, as golden leaves carpeted the sidewalks of Greenville, a figure appeared at the end of the street. Emily. She was coming back. She was unrecognizable. Her face was thinner, marked by the difficult years, her features drawn, and above all those dull, dead eyes, which seemed to carry a weight too heavy for one person alone. Her face bore the traces of a silent battle, that of a woman who had sought to rebuild herself far from everything she knew, but who had ended up losing her way. Emily had left Greenville for Miami shortly after he left. She had tried to rebuild her life, getting back together with a man she believed could give her a fresh start. She had even tried to break into the cutthroat world of fashion, a world of glamour and cutthroat competition, but she found only closed doors and repeated disappointments. Eventually, loneliness had caught up with her, as had regret. And it was this regret that had brought her back, one morning, to Austin's house. But what awaited her there was beyond anything she could have imagined. The house was no longer the modest little bungalow with faded shutters she had left. It had become a symbol of rebirth. A large wrought iron gate, crafted with artistic finesse, bore an engraved plaque, "Miller Arts, Austin's workshop, his sanctuary, his empire of metal and fire." Emily stood there for a moment, unable to believe what she was seeing. It was as if another life had been woven without her, a life full of successes she hadn't shared. It was Jordan, now a 22-year-old man, who opened the door. His gaze was steady, calm, yet filled with a quiet strength. He had become a mechanical engineer, working alongside his father on innovative projects that blended art and technology. His figure bore the maturity of someone who had grown up with responsibility. Hope, the gentle dreamer of the family, had become a locally renowned painter, exhibiting her colorful canvases in the same gallery where Austin's work had been housed. As for Elijah, the youngest, he had found refuge in music, learning to play the violin with surprising grace. Emily entered without a word, watched by the children who had grown up without her. Their curiosity was mixed with a certain respectful distance. They didn't hate her, but they no longer knew her. Those years of absence had dug an invisible gap. Austin, standing by the fireplace, greeted her politely, without rancor, but without the warmth she had once known. His hands, rough and marked by work, did not tremble. His eyes, calm, weighed each word. Emily whispered almost to herself, "I can't believe what you've become. You were just a worker." A silence fell, heavy but full of meaning. Austin looked at her for a long time, as if to probe her regrets, her doubts, her pain. Then he answered, in a soft but firm voice, "I was a father. And that, Emily, was enough to become all this." She looked down, unable to answer. The simple words hit home where it hurt. It wasn't his material success, nor his fame, but the silent strength he'd displayed when she'd run away. The next morning, Emily left. She had seen what she had lost, not by leaving Austin, but by not having the strength to stay. The strength to face the storms, to fight for their family, for the 5 children she had abandoned. Austin, however, kept moving forward, not to prove anything to anyone, but because he had learned a profound truth. Sometimes trials don't crush men. They don't break them. They build them. And in the fire of that forge, Austin Miller had found his true nature.